Emily, let me start with you. What were your overall takeaways from what we listened to of Trump's speech?
I'm curious about the optics. So I agree with a lot of what both of you just said. And I also think, though, that for Donald Trump, even in the content of the speech, what makes Donald Trump, it gets to this tension that actually you guys are talking about with this media angle, is that what's always differentiated Donald Trump from every other boilerplate Republican candidate is that he says crazy things, he gets tons of media attention, and he then becomes the sun that our culture orbits. Like, it's everything is just in Donald Trump's orbit. The entire culture becomes in Donald Trump's orbit. And without that, when he's going for this sort of normal optics of himself, at a resort, at a hotel, in a ballroom, granted a very ornate ballroom. I saw someone on Twitter say that Trump was announcing Louis XIV was going to be his vice presidential candidate, which I thought was apt. It's just not. How can you take? It's like Trump is trying to do Trump without Trump, right? Like, that's the big thing in Trump circles, is like, let Trump be Trump, or you can't have Trump without Trump. Like, DeSantis can never be Trump without Trump because it's impossible. Then why is Donald Trump himself trying to do it? I like Krystal's theory that it's a bid for the sort of rubber stamp from Republican elites that are tempted by DeSantis right now, and also perhaps independent voters. But again, like, Donald Trump is not going to win and beat Joe Biden by being Dr. Oz.
Yeah, I completely. Ryan, snap takeaway. What'd you make of everything?
One of the big draws of Donald Trump in 2016 was the fact that you weren't even sure if he wanted to win the presidency. Yeah. Like, he just wanted to get up on the stage, get up on the debate stage, say what he was going to say. Didn't matter who he offended, and he's just going to rock the boat and let the chips fall where they fell. Like, that was a real appeal for people. There was an authenticity to that. There's a real striving from him on that stage. Like, the energy that it takes for him to read from the teleprompter rather than be himself shows just how desperately he wants to get back to the White House. And there's something deeply pathetic about that desperation. Like, every politician has it, but that just means he's now like every other politician.
Right.
And so
That's
it just undercuts so much of the energy that he had. I think Krystal makes a great point of the paradox that he has to kind of rein it in order to get attention, but by reining it in, he will get less attention. And it goes back to the question of what would his prospects look like if he hadn't inspired a mob to sack the Capitol on January 6th? Because that was the moment where Twitter, Facebook, the whole media were like, okay, like, you crossed a line here. And so now, like, even though this is great for ratings and great for numbers, like, we're dialing this back here. And so now he can't do the same shtick and get the attention, but without the shtick, he doesn't get the attention. So who is he?
Yeah, right. Well, and even the shtick is old. I mean, that's part of it. Like, let's not pretend like these news organizations are like doing their civic duty by not platforming false election, whatever. No, they don't think he's gonna rate the way that he used to rate. I mean, that's part of the decision making that goes in here. And for him, that's devastating because that's everything for him. And that's a lot of his appeal, is like his ability to touch the nerve and say the thing you're not supposed to say and piss off the person you're not supposed to piss off and offend them and like everybody freak out about it. And if he's lost his ability to do that, then I mean, he really has lost a core element of what the past, however many years have ultimately been about. Emily, one thing that I wanted to ask you specifically about is it's noteworthy to me that he's not all in on the new cultural fights on the right. So none of the school stuff comes up, on like quote unquote gender ideology, none of CRT. He didn't use the word woke a single time while we were listening, which from a Republican is like, whoa, this is crazy. So that was, what do you make of that? Is that just, he doesn't feel like that's politically that salient or that powerful, packs that much of a punch? Is it just those aren't the issues that he's ever really been all in on or particularly passionate about? What do you make of that?
I think it's a fascinating point, and I actually think it's interesting in context of what he didn't talk about this time either. He used to talk about how everyone would have health insurance, and it really pissed a lot of established Republicans off. He used to talk about, I will never touch your Social Security. He used to talk about people struggling to feed their families, working multiple jobs, forever wars. This time he sounded like he was upset that Joe Biden wasn't waging war enough. I mean, seriously, like it was just a very different Donald Trump. And I think part of that problem is it's two things. One, it's when you're an incumbent or you've already been in office and you didn't drain the swamp, it becomes enormously more difficult to make the case that you are then going to go in and drain the swamp. And secondly, I think Hillary Clinton, the reason Donald Trump won in 2016, among the many reasons, was that Hillary Clinton is the perfect foil. Almost in the same way Fetterman is just like the great foil for Dr. Oz and vice versa. I don't think you get Donald Trump as president if he's running against someone other than a Clinton. And when you take that power away from him, and he's now coming into a race where it's him against maybe Ron DeSantis, maybe a Glenn Youngkin, people who have been shaped by the party that he helped reshape, it's just completely different. And he seems to be in this sort of straitjacket. It's like he's going for the 2012 autopsy version of Donald Trump, where there was like very little economic populism. He talked about trade deals, he talked about the border, but that's all pretty, standard Republican fare at this point. It's not signature Trumpism. And I just don't think you can have one without the other and have the same effect on the electorate. So that's the real conundrum. And also didn't talk about the FBI. He didn't talk about Russiagate, as someone earlier, Saagar, Krystal, you mentioned. And so it's just a very, very different version.
So I'll say a couple of things, little updates. There are, I think, important ones for us to discuss. He said, quote, "I am a victim of political corruption," alluding to the FBI. He said, and I was anticipating this as kind of a hit back against potential Ron DeSantis attacks. He said he would restore any unvaccinated member of the U.S. military back to his jobs. Third, and this is the most that he's gone so far in terms of voting, he just said and called for an end to early voting. He said, "To prevent cheating, I will restore voter ID. We will have only paper ballots. We will have same-day voting, and we all want all votes to be counted on election night," saying, quote, "Our country is a laughingstock right now." What do you make of that, Ryan, in the context of, obviously, going against mail-in ballots didn't help the Republicans in Georgia in 2020, certainly didn't help here in 2022. I think it's fascinating that after all the Stop the Steal talk, this is the furthest that he's willing to go so far.
And it's suicidal. Mail-in ballots help the party that use mail-in ballots more than the other party. Like if everybody equally uses mail-in ballots, then it's not going to help one party or the other. But as you saw in, say, Nevada, you had several weeks of early voting in which Democrats are banking all of their votes. I told Emily this on the day of the election. I talked to a Republican operative that morning. He's like, "We feel really good about Nevada. We're just getting pretty nervous about this weather report that it might snow in Reno and it might rain in Las Vegas." So you put all of your eggs in the election day basket, and if you get a freak snowstorm in Reno, then you're screwed. It rains in Vegas, you're screwed. You have some computer outages in Maricopa County, and you have long lines, and Republicans can't vote. You're screwed. So here's Donald Trump again telegraphing to his supporters not to do early voting. And that fact that he wants to get rid of it, that's cute, but like he doesn't run the governorships of Pennsylvania, of Wisconsin, of Michigan. He lost all those Secretary of State races, so he doesn't have the power to implement that by the 2024 election. So all that his words are doing now are discouraging Republicans from taking up mail-in balloting, which is just going to hurt them in the long run.
Emily, I want to pick up on something you were saying. You were talking about, like, we're sort of missing the core of Trumpism or the core of the MAGA base in this speech. And I was asking myself, well, what is that core at this point? After, like, it clearly is not the same messaging or rhetoric as you were pointing out that was there in 2016, where, there were some parts that really scrambled the political circuitry. And what it really comes down to in terms of what he has centered the party around is the Stop the Steal conspiracy. That is the beating heart of the movement. That's why you had so many election deniers who got through primaries and ended up in positions where they might have won elections. Many of them just lost. But that was a real litmus test, and that was a real energizer. And I mean, I understand that, because if you genuinely believe that a presidential election was just stolen, like, yeah, that would be a very motivating issue. So I think if he's trying to take that off the table, when he has spent years making that the center of what everybody in the party cares about, I mean, you know, yeah, they care about immigration, but that's not like what it was in 2016. Build the wall is not the thing that it was at that point. You know, they care about inflation, they care about these other things, but the true, like, passionate beating heart of Trumpism at this point is stop the steal.
And it was really used as a litmus test. That's the exact right phrase for it. And by the way, I just got a text from somebody who's in the room at the speech right now as it's ongoing, who said that people are leaving, like people are walking out of the room. And that's, yeah, sad. So that was the sort of word that was I got in the text message, basically that it felt sad. And it's, I think, kind of a remarkable thing. He continues to go on. Now, this guy, he holds court for hours. He has hours and hours long rallies. I don't know what the audience is like, how it compares to a rally in this case. I would assume it's more political professionals and journalists than it is, you know, the sort of tailgaters in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. But to your question, Krystal, it's like, when you have Donald Trump in this speech going just like kind of in the establishment Republican direction to appeal to maybe to the political elites, to appeal maybe to independents, and not really getting into the, like, it was a distraction. Like, it talks to, it, to me, it speaks to how much Stop the Steal was a distraction for Republicans. Josh Hawley coming out and saying, this last week was the funeral for the Republican Party. Well, listen, I wish that were the case, but if it were, why is Donald Trump talking like Donald Trump is talking right now? It's because he didn't have the consensus, he didn't have the will or political ability to really meaningfully drain the swamp. And I know that's a hard thing to do, impossible almost, but what was one of the first things he did? He made the CEO of Exxon the Secretary of State and installed a bunch of people from Goldman in his administration. I mean, it's just like outrageous to then come back and pitch and try to capture the same energy. Instead, what he's doing, I really think, is play acting as a president, as he always wanted to be. He's like playing the role of president. We saw the stage set up today, and I just do not think that works for Donald Trump. I don't think the math adds up, frankly.
I agree. You know, my main takeaway was this never should have been at Mar-a-Lago. It should have been in a rally. He's always fed off the energy of the room. It was a huge mistake, I think, to do it the way that
He's
they did.
He's the only one that can have rallies like that right now.
It's so true. I mean, it's like Trump rallies are like concerts. And in terms of political events, I've been to like 2 covering them. There is nothing like it. I've been to many political events. That is in a league of its own. Well, this was boring.
You know, he had originally really wanted to announce at J.D. Vance's rally.
I think it would have been the right move.
And to be honest with you, that probably would have been a better call. Right. And his advisors, I mean, this is all the reporting, who knows what really happened, but this is what's been leaked. His advisors sort of talked him down off that ledge. No, you don't do that. And so the compromise position was, okay, we'll announce that we're gonna do the announcement, and then we'll do it, a week after Election Day, and that'll be the thing. And so that's how you end up with this sort of like compromise speech situation. Obviously, in a week's time, it's not enough to spin up a whole rally. By the way, we just got an update that he's just now wrapping up the speech, so he went about an hour and 10 minutes. Not unusual for him, but it is unusual that it really feels like it's an hour and 10 minutes and felt like it kind of dragged on and on. You know, Ryan, I'm curious for your take on the question I asked Emily about how he, at least in this speech, did not really go into the new sort of cultural interests and obsessions of the right. His own obsessions obviously Stop the Steal, so he takes that off the table as like an energy and passion generator. And he didn't go into some of the new interests in the sort of like cultural right focuses and fixations. What do you make of that?
I mean, my guess is that he's just not into them. Like,
it's just not his thing, right?
A cultural conservative. He's like, everybody assumes that he's pro-choice. Like, I mean, he's been pro-choice most of his life. He just kind of lied and said he was not. And everybody knew that it was a lie, Ryan, and they're fine with that. They don't care.
That's actually a great point, because he also, while we were listening, he didn't bring up abortion, did
So
he?
I was just looking because I was about to bring up that
And,
point.
I mean,
that is extraordinary.
That is extraordinary because that is one of the things that I thought he would really sell to the base on is, I'm the dude that got it done. You know, for years and years, we've been talking about it and we've been hoping for it. Well, I put the justices on the court and they did the thing. But, you know, there's been reporting that he was not. He saw right away when Dobbs came down that this was going to be a problem for Republicans. There's also reporting that all along, he thought Republicans would do okay in the midterms, but he didn't think they were going to have the massive red wave because he thought abortion was going to be a problem for them. So very noteworthy that he seems to have stayed almost entirely or completely away from a topic that I really thought he would sell hard to the base.
Same.
Well, and quickly, just when Ron DeSantis won last week, he said Florida is where wokeism goes to die.
Yes.
Like, that's a huge contrast with the speech that Trump just gave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. And you know, DeSantis wants to be the guy doing cringe on social media. Trump wants to do the cringe on Truth Social.
Truth Social.
And Trump,
they got all their bases covered.
Trump wants to be the guy that's going to ban abortion in the future if you just continue to give him power. I don't think he wants to be the guy that banned abortion. Like, I think he's embarrassed about that and thinks it was a mistake.
Every leak that ever was come out from the Trump or from the Trump advisors was he thought that it was not a mistake necessarily, but he's like, this is going to be a problem. Allegedly, you know, Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman were all writing before the election or before his announcement that part of the reason why he anticipated not having as much of a red wave is he thought abortion was going to be more important. In a lot of ways, you know, he got almost too much of what he wished for because running on it was very powerful for a lot of these evangelicals. To me, the crazy thing is no stop the steal, no abortion. To have neither of those in a 68-minute speech by Donald Trump in this election, that is just underscores again that he was not speaking, I think, necessarily to the general election, or maybe he was in his own mind, but he was trying to shore up, Emily, Republican elites, saying this is not, you know, the election announcement that many of them probably would have anticipated. And he's not necessarily giving a reason for Ron DeSantis and others to jump in. Or what am I reading that differently? How would you read it?
Yeah, I think he's trying to sort of corner the presidential, like, I have been the president of the United States.
Right.
I accomplished X, Y, and Z. I have been there before. This other guy's just a governor. This other guy's a senator, but I am a former president, and this is sort of my lane. I have done it, and I think that's probably why he staged it at Mar-a-Lago in the sort of ornate ballroom as opposed to the casual setting of a rally. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's why they tried to make it look very formal. I think that's why he stuck to the script intentionally, got there on time, and I think the speech was way too long, but he hit all of the sort of notes that, you know, establishment Washington Republicans would want him to hit. So it's strange, and I think Krystal's theory is still the best explanation, that what he's trying to do is reassure the consultant class, the professional political class, that he can be presidential, he can appeal to independence, he can be the guy who's the contrast with Joe Biden. He immediately drew himself into contrast with Joe Biden as opposed to Ron DeSantis or other Republicans, whereas before he was drawing himself in contrast with the entire political class, right? And I know he's mentioned the corrupt system a couple of times in that speech. It wasn't the theme. In the past, the theme would have been drain the swamp, the system's corrupt, quote, I alone can fix it. And it's much, much harder to make that pitch when you're an incumbent. So I think he sees his lane as being someone who is the heavyweight, the former president who can come in and just get it done, get the old coalition together, peel off those independents. But again, I don't see how that math works for him. If he's running the Dr. Oz campaign, he's not going to put up the same kind of numbers in Wisconsin's 3rd, in Erie County, and all of those different places, because the people that crossed over and voted for him aren't all members of that hardcore base, and some of them are exasperated too.
I mean, on the other hand, if he is able to be a boring, buttoned-up Trump like he was tonight for when he needs to be, and he's able to do his thing and be the guy at the rally putting on the show and making the wild claims for the base when he needs to be and wants to be, then maybe that, you know, maybe that works out for him, Ryan. I guess my question is, Do you think this speech, which was different than what we expected and different than most Donald Trump speeches and, you know, kind of boring and not all that remarkable ultimately and kind of very low energy, do you think it does damage to him? Or do you think that he accomplished what his goal was, which was to signal to people, see, I can read the teleprompter, I can be the good boy, I can stay in the lane where you want me to stay?
I think you're right that it's too early to say on that because, you know, maybe the Jekyll and Hyde thing works for him down the road. That's certainly possible. But I think the point about abortion not being mentioned is, you know, really needs even more unpacking. Like, if, you know, the secret to Trump's success was, we can talk all we want about the white working class and all that, but it's really the evangelical vote.
Yes.
And that was an extraordinarily pragmatic vote that was like willing to put up with this moral train wreck that is Donald Trump because they were going to get what he was promising, which was a bunch of justices on the Supreme Court that were going to overturn Roe v. Wade. All right, so now they've gotten that. They've overturned Roe v. Wade. Now he's no longer interested in their culture war stuff. He's still a moral train wreck. So what does he have to sell them anymore?
Well, and not only that, but I mean, there will be other candidates. Mike Pence has all but said he's going to run, and he would run. He's already said, I want a national abortion ban. I mean, that's the next push for that particular group of voters, you know, their core cause. They've got a champion in Mike Pence. But, you know, Ron DeSantis has also been very reluctant to go all in with the evangelicals on abortion. So it's not a point of contrast, really, between the two of them.
It's also interesting. Yeah, well, I was going to say it's also interesting because one of the things a lot of the sort of national conservatives or right populists point to as a major accomplishment of the Trump administration is an executive order he issued late in his presidency on critical race theory. And to Krystal's point, we heard so little about that. We heard so little of the rhetoric that a lot of people on the right, especially in the sort of populist Trump sphere, see as being powerful. And potent, which is Republicans need to become the party of families. They need to become the party of parents, whatever that means. And there was like virtually none of that, despite the fact that if you went down to the NatCon conference or CPAC or wherever and listened to what people were saying, they're talking about that. And instead, I mean, maybe though it's because Donald Trump realizes that, you know, there's the competition. He's not going to be the abortion candidate in a race with Mike Pence. Like, if you're a single issue voter, Donald Trump's not going to be your guy in a primary against Mike Pence or Ted Cruz or whomever else. But then again, this is what's so hard about it. That's the fundamental tension. If you're a conservative voter, period, why would you go with Trump over DeSantis? And I think that explains the tone of the speech tonight, which is you would go with him because he's been there before, as opposed to his old pitch, which is you would go with him because he's never been there before and he'll drain the swamp.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I mean, look, Ryan, let's play devil's advocate here. As Emily just said, there's a lot of structural reasons as to why Trump was powerful with the base. Why, you know, if you're a conservative, you may not go with him, but while these new people could stick with him, it's only November 15th, 2022. 2 years is a long time. A lot can change. So what's your, you know, structural takeaway in seeing how the Democrats may handle Trump now going forward as a result of this speech, having now watched it?
I think that one big thing to watch is how confident Republicans are about their chances in 2024. And no matter who's the nominee. And I think that's what he was trying to cue up. He's like, okay, look, yeah, we didn't do great this time, but in 2 years, trust me, it's going to be so bad that, you know, even though I'm a bad candidate, I will be able to win. Like, I think that was kind of the subtext of what he was saying there. And he has, to some degree, the power to affect that change. His good friend, the Crown Prince over in Saudi Arabia, could jack gas prices back up to $6 or $7 a gallon, and no matter what Jay Powell does, push the country into a recession. Jay Powell might push the country into a recession even without MBS's help. So that, I think, if you do see that, if you start to see the economy deteriorate, and if you see a crowded primary, like not just Pence, but and not just DeSantis, maybe a couple of others, that allows him to skate through. He gets some of his mojo back in the rallies. Yeah, I wouldn't count him out, but it certainly doesn't look good for him now.
Yep.
Brian, I have another theory about why he didn't talk about abortion, why he didn't talk about trans issues, he didn't talk about CRT, didn't talk about anti-woke, which is that, you know, for all of Trump's issues and failings and flaws and all the rest, he's oftentimes had a better political gut instinct than other Republicans. And that shows up in some of, you know, the immediate reaction to Roe being overturned, for example, and him continuing to hold the thought of like, you know, guys, I don't know that this is going to go as well for you in the midterms as you ultimately think. There are reports that also after he watched the Fetterman debate, he had the opposite take of all the, you know, strategists who, oh, this is devastating. And he reportedly was like, you know, I think people are going to feel bad for him. I don't think this is going to hurt him the way that y'all think it's going to. So, you know, we just had an election where Republicans leaned into a lot of these cultural issues, and it didn't go well. I mean, even at the local level, there was a big push to take over school boards and all of that. That didn't go nearly as well as they thought it was going to, even when you're just focused on these like school level issues. So he may have a sense that these issues for a general electorate or an independent audience aren't the selling point that a lot of other conservatives think they are.
Right, and I think he's probably right, you know, particularly on Roe, and you know, it was much easier for him to sell it in theory, like to tell the audience, like, you know, don't worry, you know, I'm with you, we're going to get this done, when people didn't believe that it was actually going to happen, and you know, and it almost didn't, except for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you know, passing away at the very end. Like the idea that he was going to get to appoint 3 justices who then immediately would overturn Roe isn't something that I think anybody understood could happen that quickly. I mean, people were definitely predicting that it would happen, but just not that quickly. And so he's again kind of victim of his own success there. But I think you're right. You know, he has spent an enormous amount of time in kind of in the world of Hollywood and in a broader world than a lot of Republicans who are, you know, in a right-wing ecosystem, a right-wing bubble, whereas he's been, you know, across the entire kind of pop culture. And so I think he does recognize that, you know, he lived through the 2010s. I don't think he thinks that this culture war stuff is going to be majoritarian fast enough for him to ride it.
What do you think, Emily?
Well, he also had a really good gut instinct on trade and immigration and foreign entanglements. And I just didn't hear much of that in the speech either. So I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that
he did go in on trade and Ukraine and Russia and
North Korea.
Immigration. He was going, when we actually cut away, he was doing his whole typical immigration, build the wall thing.
Saagar,
I just don't know that those issues aren't the they aren't the burning passion of the base the way that some of, you know, that Stop the Steal is, for example, at this point.
What were you saying, Emily? Go ahead.
Well, I was saying you had a funny tweet where you were like, "Where is the snake?" And Trump's speeches of the past, he painted this very vivid picture of America, tapping into these issues, saying, you're getting screwed. The borders are wide open. People are flooding through. So he definitely did the sort of paint by numbers version of, you know, some of those issues. But he used to, like, remember the reaction to his American Carnage inauguration speech, which sounded a lot like a lot of speeches he'd given previously, that just painted this very dark but vivid and visceral picture of the country. And he always had that sense with immigration, that it was really strong and that he could use that as a gateway into the Republican Party. When he was calling into Fox News for years in the 2010s, he was talking all the time about immigration and trade. And he absolutely did touch on those things. I guess I just didn't see it wrapped into this broader narrative about American decay.
It was just talking points.
I think
it felt like talking points.
I think you guys are right. I mean, what I'm really hearing is, like, thematically, it wasn't as on point. It wasn't a good performance stylistically. It was mishmash. Some takeaways and what wasn't included, what not. I think my major one is, look, we still got 2 years. Anything can happen.
Oh,
so, yeah.
We got a long road ahead of us. And Emily and Ryan, we are very glad to have you guys by our side so we can all get through this together.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys for staying. Well, for me, it's staying up late. Maybe it's not for you, but thank you for staying up late with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, Saagar, for me, the most stunning parts are the pieces that were left out.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
abortion not being there, really super noteworthy.
Yeah.
And then The fact that you don't have the Stop the Steal claims, also really super noteworthy. And then just the style of the speech. That was clearly very intentional choice. And, you know, as you are aptly pointing out, like, this is just the beginning. This is day one. He's going to, I'm sure, go and do a rally and be like the crazy thing that we expect and say all kinds of things that are going to make people pull their hair out. And we'll see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, look, I mean, this could be an asterisk. We could forget it. You know, 6 months from now, we may not be talking about it at all.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, if he loses or if something really happens, we could say, well, this was a lackluster beginning to effectively what is a lackluster effort. I have been humbled many times with predictions. I have no idea what will happen. All I can say is what exactly is going down right at this moment. So anyways, it was a real pleasure being with you all. Just so we have right now, as we said in our last live stream, we had the discount code. So by popular acclaim, it's back. It's pinned in the chat, and it's also down in the description. If you guys can help us build up for 2024 coverage, as we had during midterms, we had people on the ground at John Fetterman and Dr. Oz's campaigns. We want many, many more. And also, we really want to get somebody to do data and elections analysis for us. So if you can help us in the premium membership, specifically the annual one, which we have discounted, it really gives us the cash flexibility to go out there to find and hire somebody, potentially expand on more partnerships to give you guys like the best election coverage that we possibly can.
Yeah, we are already thinking about what we can do next time around,
Yep.
learning from the midterms, trying to expand our coverage, getting someone in-house who can crunch the data for us, I
Yep.
think is going to be a key part of that, and having more people on the ground. All of those things that you guys enable. We love you. Thank you for hanging with us tonight. We're back to regular schedule. We're going to be posting these clips tomorrow and then full show like normal on Thursday, Counterpoints on Friday. Love y'all. See you soon.
Love you guys.